The guiding hands of Sir Alex and United's giants, forging Ronaldo's path. Imagine an 18-year-old boy stepping into Manchester United's towering world in August 2003. His boots still stiff, his English a stammering mess, his body a wiry frame dwarfed by the giants around him. Cristiano Ronaldo arrives from Sporting Lisbon for £12.24 million, a record for a teenager, handed the number 7 shirt, a legacy of Best, Cantona, Beckham, that hangs heavy on his shoulders like a borrowed coat. Old Trafford is no gentle cradle. It's a forge, hot and unyielding, with a Premier League's pace and power threatened to break him. He stumbles. His debut against Bolton flashes flair, but no finish. His early months drown in jeers of too flashy. His step-overs mocked as a boy's tricks in a man's game. I felt small, he'd say later, voice soft, like I didn't fit. But he isn't alone. Above him looms Sir Alex Ferguson, a gruff Scotsman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, a father figure who sees past his stumbles to the fire within. Around him stand United's titans, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Roy Keane, men of steel and skill, who guide him, sometimes with a nudge, sometimes with a glare, through a storm he can't weather alone. Together, they take this boy with too many tricks, shield him from the world's scorn, and shape him, slowly, sternly, into a star who'd one day shine brighter than they ever dreamed. This is no fairy tale of instant glory. It's a tale of grit, guidance, and a kid from Madeira molded by masters into a legend. Picture Sir Alex Ferguson that first day, watching Ronaldo at Carrington, the rain streaking the training ground, the boy's dark hair plastered to his forehead. He's raw, a blur of pace and flicks, dazzling but directionless, his dribbles ending in tangles, his shots flying wild. Too much, Ferguson mutters, but his eyes narrow, not with doubt, but with vision. He's got it, he tells his staff, voice thick with that Scottish burr, heart got something special. Ronaldo's debut against Bolton Wanderers, 30 minutes off the bench, a 4-0 win, shows it. Speed that cuts, tricks that tease, but no end product. The fans scoff, another flop, the press bites, 12 million wasted. Ferguson doesn't flinch. He's young. He snapped at a reporter after a loss to Wolves. Give him time. That's his first gift. Protection, a shield against a world too quick to judge. I'd hear them, Ronaldo would recall. The boos, the papers, but he'd say, ignore it, son. Ferguson stands like a wall, his faith a fortress, letting the boy breathe when the air feels too thick to take. But Sir Alex is no soft touch. He's a sculptor, chiseling away at Ronaldo's rough edges with a firm hand. Less dancing, he barks after a game against Newcastle, where Ronaldo's double step over leaves him flat under Shearer's bulk. Play simple, play smart. It's a lesson from a man who'd turned boys into champions, Giggs, Beckham, Neville, and now sees this kid as clay to mold. I'd dribble, Ronaldo would say, and he'd shout, pass, against Southampton in December. He tries it, a quick 1-2 with Scholes, a cut inside, a shot that schemes the post. Better, Ferguson nods, a rare crack of approval. He'd push me, Ronaldo would reflect, hard but right. That push isn't gentle. It's Ferguson pulling him aside after losses, voice low but cutting. You're not here to show off, you're here to win. It stings, a boy who danced through Lisbon's defenses now told to strip it down, but it sticks. I'd listen, he'd say, because I trusted him. Ferguson's like a father, not the warm hugs of Maria back in Madeira, but the tough love of a man who'd fight for you, bleed for you, shape you. He'd protect me, Ronaldo would confess, like I was his. After a 3-0 loss to Chelsea in November, the press pounces, overrated, they write, a flop, but Ferguson steps in. Nonsense, he growls at a press conference. He's 18, learning he'll be great. That faith isn't blind. It's fierce, a belief that steadies Ronaldo when his legs shake. I'd mess up, he'd say, and he'd still back me. Against Portsmouth, that free kick screamer, his first United goal, lands, and Ferguson's there, a gruff good lad, his only praise. He'd teach me, Ronaldo would note, not just football life. Simple passes, sharp runs, fewer tricks. Ferguson strips the flair to build a foundation, turning a boy with too many moves into a player with purpose. I grow, he'd say, because of him. Then there's the dressing room. United's giants, men who'd won it all, who don't coddle but carve. Ryan Giggs, the Welsh wizard, sees Ronaldo's pace and thinks of his own youth. He'd run. Giggs would laugh later, like I used to wild free. After a training session, Giggs pulls him aside. Use it smarter, he says, showing a quick cut, a sharper turn. I'd watch him. Ronaldo would recall his feet, his calm. Against Aston Villa in April 2004, it shows Ronaldo takes Giggs' pass, shrugs a defender, slots it home, his fourth goal. Ryan helped, he'd say, quietly but real. Giggs doesn't preach, he plays, and Ronaldo learns, a mirror of speed and grace reflecting back at him. He'd show me, he'd note how to win. Paul Scholes, the ginger maestro, is quieter still, a man of few words but endless craft. He'd pass, Ronaldo would marvel, and it'd land perfect. Early on, Scholes glares when Ronaldo holds too long. Against Wolves, a dribble lost, a chance gone, but he doesn't shout, he shows. Give it, he mutters once, then threads a ball through 5 defenders in practice. I'd see, Ronaldo would say, and try. Against Southampton, that 1-2 with Scholes, a flick, a return, a near miss. Earns a nod, Scholes' rare stamp. He'd teach me. Ronaldo would reflect, without talking much. Scholes' game, simple, lethal, seeps in. Fewer twists, more cuts, a lesson in efficiency. I'd copy, he'd say, because it worked. Roy Keane, though, Keane's a storm. United's captain, all fire and iron, doesn't suffer fools or flair. Too many tricks, he growls after a Newcastle loss. Ronaldo's step-overs ending in dirt. Play the game, he snaps, eyes blazing. I'd feel it, Ronaldo would admit, like he hated me. But Keane doesn't hate, he demands. Against Arsenal, Vieira flattens Ronaldo. Keane hauls him up, get on with it. It's brutal, but it's care, a warrior's way. He'd push me, Ronaldo would say, to toughen up. By spring, it shows. Against Charlton, Ronaldo takes a hit, stays up, fires wide, but Keane nods, a flicker of respect. Roy was hard, he'd recall, but he made me harder. These men, Ferguson, Giggs, Scholes, Keane, aren't just teammates. They're a forge, hammering Ronaldo's raw talent into steel. I'd come in free, he'd say, too free. His sporting flair, step-overs, flicks, clashes with United's machine. Fast, fierce winning. They'd get mad, he'd laugh, when I'd lose it. Against Birmingham, a dribble too many, Neville shouts, pass, you prat. But Giggs calms it, Scholes adjusts it, Keane glares at gone. I'd learn, he'd say slowly. Ferguson's voice cuts loudest, simple, son, and the others echo it, a chorus of grit. They'd shape me, he'd note, each one different. By May 22nd, 2004, it shows. The FA Cup final against Millwall, a 3-0 win, Ronaldo's header opening the floodgates. I'd felt it, he'd say, then behind me. Ferguson's faith puts him there, starting, trusted. Giggs' run stretched the field. Scholes' pass finds Neville. Keane's snarl keeps Millwall at bay. They'd set it up, he'd recall, and I'd finish. That leap, that header, pure Ronaldo, but built by them. Ferguson's lessons in timing, Giggs' pace and space, Scholes' precision in play, Keane's fire and fight. I'd grown, he'd say, because of them. The crowd chants, 73,000 strong. And the boy who danced too much now stands tall, a star emerging from their hands. It's not smooth, never smooth. They'd argue, he'd laugh. With me, with each other. Keane's temper flares when tricks fail. Scholes' silence stings when passes miss. Giggs' patience frays when runs don't connect. I mess up, he'd admit, a lot. Against Tottenham, a flick goes wrong. Keane's roar echoes. Ferguson hauls him off, enough. But they don't quit him. They'd stay, he'd say, push harder. Post-game talks, Ferguson's gruff, next time, Giggs quiet, keep it tight, Scholes rare, good try. Keep him going. I'd feel it, he'd note their belief. This isn't instant stardom, it's a slow burn. I was a kid, he'd say wild lost. Ferguson fathers him, shields him from scorn, teaches him the game's bones. He'd say, "You're enough," Ronaldo would recall, and I believe. Giggs guides his feet, Scholes his eyes, Keane his spine, each a piece in a puzzle they solve together. They'd fight me, he'd laugh, to fix me. By season's end, 6 goals, an FA Cup. Ronaldo's no longer too flashy. He's a spark turning flame. I'd change, he'd say, because they wouldn't let me fail. From Madeira's streets to Lisbon's turf, now United's roar, Ronaldo rises. Not alone, but lifted. Sir Alex was my rock, he'd confess. The others my roots. That FA Cup header isn't his alone. It's there's a boy's talent forged by men who saw what he couldn't. I become more, he'd say, because of them. Old Trafford hums. Not loud yet, but steady. A chant for a kid no longer much chew, but a star, raw and real, shaped by a father's hand and brother's steel. They made me, he'd whisper me,